Hello, and welcome to our Panelboards Overview Brain Chart. Today we'll be covering all of the panel boards that Siemens has to offer. As you can see here, our panel boards are split into two main categories. The first one is lighting panels. This covers our P1 through P3 panel boards, as well as our column type C1 and C2 panel boards. And our second category is power panel boards, which covers our P4 and P5 panel boards. Here we have a quick overview of what we'll be covering in this brain chart. First, we'll start out with just in general, what is a panel board? Once we have that defined, we'll go into the distinction between lighting panel boards versus power panel boards. Then we'll do a quick comparison of all of the panel boards in our P series family, which ranges from P1 all the way to P5. Then we will break out into more individual information on each one of those panel boards. Finally, we'll wrap up with some key selling features for our panel boards and follow all of this with some support information for you if you have any additional questions. So to start out, some of you may be thinking, what exactly is a panel board? Well, by definition, a panel board is a type of enclosure for overcurrent protection devices and the buses and connections that provide power to these devices and their associated circuit. So overall, a panel board is defined by a few specifications, and you can see those listed here. Typically, they are used to control light, heat, or power circuits. They're placed in a cabinet or cutout box, mounted in or against a wall, and finally, panel boards are accessible only from the front. If you would like to see more information on what qualifies something to be a panel board, you can reference the National Electric Code or NEC for more details. Now that we know what qualifies something to be a panel board, let's find out how it fits into a typical electrical distribution system. To do this, let's step through an example of one such system. So, in some cases where the customer may have medium voltage equipment on site, such as medium voltage switchgear, that switchgear takes in the utility power and feeds a transformer, which will step the medium voltage down to a much more manageable low voltage, which is typically 480 volts or 208 volts in the United States. At this point, the power comes into the switchboard, which acts like a distribution system to all of the lower loads. At this point, we reach the focus of our presentation, lighting panel boards and power panel boards. These act as kind of the last line of defense before your power gets fed into either your lighting and appliances from a lighting panel board or a motor control for a power panel board. Now that you know what exactly a panel board is and how it fits into a typical electrical distribution system, you may still be wondering one thing. What exactly is the difference between lighting panel boards and power panel boards? Well, the 2008 National Electric Code actually eliminated the official distinction between the two, but the terms are still widely used in industry today. So the distinctions prior to 2008, which were defined in Articles 408.34 and 408.35 in the NEC, stated that lighting and appliance panel boards had to have a maximum of 42 overcurrent protection devices in any one unit. So you can think of an overcurrent protection device as typically a one-pole breaker, which is rated for 30 amps or less. These distinctions also stated that greater than 10% of the overcurrent protection devices in a panel for a lighting and appliance panel board had to be used for lighting and appliance loads. So one kind of interesting note to mention is that residential load centers are actually considered lighting panels. So the only main difference is that residential lighting panels incorporate plug-on breakers, while commercial lighting panel boards typically include bolt-on breakers. Also, the load centers in your home are typically made to be smaller so that they actually fit between the studs in your house. So, moving on to the distinctions for power panel boards, there's basically any panel board that doesn't fit the lighting and appliance panel board restrictions. So this meant that power panel boards are typically larger, so they incorporate more overcurrent protection devices, and or they include loads that are for a higher amperage or not used for lighting and appliances. Now that we've covered all of the basics of panel boards, let's see what Siemens has to offer. As you can see, Siemens offers a stepped approach to panel boards with our P-Series family. As you can see off to the left, you see the footprint of our enclosures. And as you go from P1 all the way to P5, you see an increase in that footprint of our enclosures for these panel boards. One thing to note is that our P1 and P2 panel boards actually fit into the same family of enclosures. So as we move through our lighting panels, as you can see here include P1, P2, and P3, with our P1 fitting a majority of our lighting panel needs in a very cost-effective package. As we move up to P2, we increase in some of our flexibility and we have more options to fit more demanding specifications. And then once we move from these P1 and P2s up to P3, we see a bit of a size jump. But with that, our P3 panel board is very flexible and innovative. And while it's still sized like a lighting panel, it actually has the power more like a small power distribution panel. So as we step up out of our lighting panels into our power panels, you also see another decent size increase. But moving on to P4, we have more of a mid-sized panel board that can include fusible switches and a circuit breaker main, as well as branch devices. Then jumping up in footprint to P5, we have our largest panel board that we offer as Siemens, and this includes also our largest availability for fusible and circuit breaker mains and branch devices to provide maximum power to our customers. As you can see here, we have a table breaking down all of the differences between our P-Series panel boards. So to start out, let's review what's in this table. You can see off to the left, we have the dimensions of each of these panel boards. We have the maximum voltage as well as systems available in each. We also go into the ratings for our main lugs as well as main breakers for each of these panels. Then we break down the amount of circuits or unit space depending on which panel board you're looking at. Then close out with our ratings for main switches as well as branches for each of these panel boards. So to discuss some of the overall trends as we go throughout this P-Series family, as you move up from P1 all the way to P5, you typically see an increase in footprint, which you can see through our dimensions specified in the first 3 rows. And also with that increase in dimensions, you also see an increase in the ratings. So although you do increase in size, you also increase your capability. One other thing to note as you go from P1 all the way to P5 is typically as we increase our panel board size and ratings, your prices for these panel boards also increase. But one thing to note is because panel boards are typically very customized, the price depends a lot upon what you're actually putting inside of these panel boards. So now that we have an overarching comparison of all of these options in our P-Series family, let's go into more specific details on each one individually. So first, let's go into the specifications that we have for our P1 lighting panel boards. As you can see here, we have our ratings for our P1 panel boards with our main lug panels ranging from 125 amps all the way up to 400 amps, while our main breakers for these panels can range from 100 amps all the way up to 400 amps. Then as we move on, our branch breakers can be anywhere in between 15 amps and 125 amps, coming in two main formats, our BL-BQD breakers, as well as our XGB breakers. Then as we move on into our maximum number of circuits, for our 250 amp rated panels, we can include 18 circuits all the way up to 66 circuits. And for our 400 amp panels, these start at 30 circuits and can go up to 66 circuits. And so one thing to note is these are in increments of 12 circuits, which correlates to 6 inches of space for our enclosures. Now that we know some of the basic specifications of our P1 lighting panel boards, let's go into some of the main features of them. So to start out, one of the biggest things to note is that these panel boards come into two primary branch breaker section formats. These are our BL-BQD formats as well as our XGB 3VA41 format. So what this means is that if our customers want to mix and match breakers that need different types of formats, then they will not be able to do that in our P1 panel boards. So if we can, we want to focus our customers into breakers that fit into one format, so we can stick with the cheaper P1 option rather than moving up the line in the P-Series family. Also, some of the other big benefits is we have feed-through and non-feed-through versions. So a little bit about this, our feed-through versions include things like feed-through lugs, a sub-feed breaker, or a surge protection device underneath our branch circuits. And one neat feature is if we don't need to incorporate any of that, we can have a non-feed-through panel, which actually reduces our panel height by 6 inches, which is a nice space savings benefit to our customers. Also, one recent addition that we made in our P1 panels is that we extended the circuit options up to 54 or 66 circuits, which is another great benefit because now we can eliminate the potential need for a second panel or the use of a P2 or P3 panel, whereas before we were limited to only 42 circuits. Then also moving on to another nice benefit, our 400 amp panels now have a new 750 kcmil main lug only option, and that allows us to incorporate larger cables. But our copper cables are limited to 600 kcmil. Next, a lot of our nice features are that these are very flexible and have a lot of field options to them. So, for example, our neutral system is field upgradable up to 200% capacity, and its two-knot neutral capability is also field installable. In addition to this, we're able to convert in the field from a main lug panel board to a main breaker version with just a kit to switch that up there. And we also are able to accept most common options that customers may specify without increasing box height. And another final great feature is that we're suitable for use as service entrance equipment. One important thing to note about our P1 lighting panel boards is that they are very commonly used in industry today. Siemens sees the importance of this, so he created an unassembled panel board, or UPB program, specifically for these P1 panel boards. So this program allows any distributors that take part in it to provide same-day availability of unassembled panel boards that are an exact match with Siemens factory-assembled panels for at least our most popular systems. This means that customers won't have all the customizable features that you would typically get out of a factory-assembled panel board, but they are extremely available and on hand at distributors, which is a big benefit for our customers. With that, there are some limitations in what we have as options, but we tried to hit on the most popular items. So we have 3 main voltage and systems available within these UPB panels. We have a limitation of a maximum of 54 circuits, so you don't have that 66 circuit option like factory assembled. Also, the non-feed-through variations are unavailable in this UPB program. So basically, we don't get that extra 6 inches of savings like you would on a factory assembled panel board. All in all though, Siemens is trying to be as flexible as possible to meet the needs of our customers with this UPV program. Now that we've covered the base of our lighting panel boards, the P1, let's move on to the specifications for our P2 lighting panel board. Here you can see all of the ratings which are listed. I'll go over some of the changes that you didn't see on P1. For our main lug and main breaker panels, they go all the way up to 600 amps now. And our branch ratings for these go from 15 amps to 225 amps with a wider variety of formats for these breakers. They can be BL, BQD, XGB, XGB2, or QR. And also we're planning on incorporating 3VA, 4.1, and more formats in the future. Also for our sub-feed specifications, you can see for twin-mounted sub-feed breakers, we can range from 70 amps to 250 amps, as well as 200 amps to 400 amps for our single-mounted breakers. And you can see the formats for those listed off to the right. And one cool thing to note is our 3VA5 and 3VA6 and more formats are planning on coming in the future. Now moving on to the maximum number of circuits, as you can see here, we range from 18 all the way up to 90 circuits now, and this correlates to 9 inches all the way up to 45 inches of unit space. So as you can see here, like before, these are in increments of 6 inches of unit space as we go up. So now that we've covered all of the ratings and specifications for these P2 lighting panel boards, let's move on to the features of them. So to start out, one of the big features is that now we have the ability to actually mix breaker frames in unit space up to 225 amps, which allows us to meet power distribution panel requirements, but in a much smaller package than a power panel. And our sub-feed can be up to 400 amps. And this is a nice, great big benefit that we weren't able to get in our P1 panel boards. Also, we are incorporating our new 3VA thermomagnetic trip and electronic trip breakers starting in fiscal year 18 to 19, which is really exciting with that brand new technology coming into these panel boards. Also, to emphasize some of the flexibility of this panel, you can see our standard enclosure size is 20 inches wide by 5.75 inches deep, but we also have options to increase that depth to 7.75 inches or increase the width to 24 inches. And this is for our NEMA Type 1 enclosures. So other type enclosures may have some limited sizes available. Also, to emphasize more of the flexibility, we have more busing options available starting at these P2 panel boards. So these include our standard busing, which is temperature rated aluminum with tin plating, but we also have temperature rated copper, which is standardly tin plated, but we also have silver plating optional, or we can bump it up to 750 amps per square inch aluminum, tin plated, or even all the way up to 1000 amps per square inch copper, standardly tin plated, but we have silver plating optional here as well. So now let's move on to the last of our P series lighting panel boards with the specifications for our P3 panels. As you can see here, we have an increase in some of the ratings from the P2, with our main lug panels starting at 250 amps now, but ranging all the way up to 800 amps. Our main breaker panels are still from 100 to 600 amps, and our branch breakers now can go all the way up to 250 amps. We also have an additional format available with these P3s, moving on into the 3VA5.2, and we also plan on incorporating 3VA 4.1 and more branch breaker formats in the future. Also, our sub-feed breakers you can see have the same ratings as in P2, with FD for our twin mounted and JD for our single mounted for the formats there. We also plan on incorporating 3VA5, 3VA6, and even more formats in the future for these sub-feeds. Moving on into the enclosure heights, you can see they range from 56 all the way up to 80 inches. and unit space ranging from 9 to 45 inches. And once again, just like before, these range in increments of 6 inches. And one nice benefit is we can also include blank unit space if the customer wants to potentially expand in the future, just like with our P2 panels. Now let's move on to the features of these P3 lighting panel boards. Let's start with looking at the footprints. Although these are technically considered lighting panel boards, they're more like small footprint power distribution panel boards, with their footprint being 24 inches in width by 7.75 inches in depth, with heights ranging from 56 all the way up to 80 inches. And so these are designed for applications that really require more or larger branch devices than you would typically find in a lighting panel board. Also, we have a large variety of factory assembled options, which is very similar to a P2. And we also have the ability to mix and match breaker frames in unit space all the way up to 250 amps now, up from the 225 amps that you saw in P2, with the new 3VA 5.2 launch in fiscal year 18. Also, as was mentioned before, we have the ability to include blank unit space, which is a nice option for future expansion to the customers. Here we want to really dive into the benefits of this 3VA integration that we'll be seeing in fiscal year 18. One of the reasons why we're really excited about this 3VA 5.2 coming into play is it's available as a twin mount up to 6 positions, which means we're 480 volts delta capable and will allow more configurations to fit a P3 rather than bumping up to a larger P4 panel, which is a huge benefit for our customers that we can sell on, because as you can see listed below, we have our P3 series panels being a much smaller footprint than our P4 panels, and saving space is a huge benefit to customers. So we're really excited about this new 3VA technology to be integrated with our P3 panel boards specifically to allow them to be more flexible and cost efficient for our customers. So now that we've concluded all of the lighting panel boards in our P-Series family, let's move on to the first of our power panels, the P4. You can see we have all of the specifications for our P4 listed here. The biggest thing to note is that now that we've moved into power panel boards, we have an increase up in our ratings available. So our main lug P4s are able to go from 400 all the way up to 1200 amps now. Also, our main breaker panels have an increase up to 800 amps available. And a new option for our power panel boards is the ability to have a main fusible switch, which for our P4 can be rated in anywhere between 100 and 200 amps. Also, we have some adjustments in our branch devices, so our branch breakers can be rated all the way up to 800 amps now, and we have the new option of a branch fusible switch, which can be rated from 30 amps to 200 amps. One last thing to note on the specifications is that our power panel boards are much taller now, so you can see they range from 60 inches to 75 or even 90 inches tall. But we can still include blank unit space if our customers would like to expand, just like before. Now let's move on to the features of our P4 power panel boards. Here we can start with the footprint. Looking at this, we are a medium footprint panel board now, ranging from 32 inches in width by 10 inches in depth. Here we also are able to fit applications with more or larger branch devices and higher current ratings than any of our lighting and appliance panel boards that we've looked at previously. Also here we can incorporate circuit breaker frames and unit space all the way up to 800 amps, which is a huge increase from our P3s. And we can also have fusible switches up to 200 amps, which is also a new benefit that we didn't see in our lighting panel boards. Moving on to our branch breakers, 150 amps and above include Centron and VL series breakers many with electronic trip capability that wasn't available in our smaller lighting panels. So moving on to these power panel boards, these have the widest variety of our branch breaker formats that we've seen so far. Now let's move on to the final and largest panel board in this P series family, the P5 Power Panel Board. All of the ratings are listed here. You can see the main lug panels are still the same ratings as our P4 power panel boards, but we saw a huge increase in our main breaker panels as well as main fusible switch panels. These can now be rated all the way up to 1200 amps. Also, we saw a similar increase in our branch devices with both branch breakers as well as branch fusible switches, also ranging all the way up to 1200 amps now for our P5 power panel boards. And while we did see a huge increase in our ratings, we have the exact same options available for enclosure height. So we still have the 60, 75, or 90 inches available. And just like before, we can still include blank unit space if our customers would like to expand in the future. Finally, let's move on to the features of this P5 power panel board. As was mentioned before, this is our largest in this whole series. Now, what that means is that our footprint is now up to 35 inches in width by 12.75 inches in depth. This allows us to include even higher rated main and branch devices than in any of our other panel boards. Also, this means that we can include circuit breaker frames in unit space up to 1200 amps and fusible switches up to 1200 amps. All in all, this makes it the most capable option in this P series family, which makes it a nice way to conclude all of our options from this family of panel boards that Siemens has to offer. Now that we've discussed all of the options in our very popular P series panel board family, let's move on to briefly discuss our column type panel boards. These column type panel boards add some variety to Siemens' portfolio by allowing us to meet very demanding customer specifications needing to have a narrow width suitable for column mounting. So our column types are broken into C1 and C2, with C1 being designed for a 240 volts AC maximum service with a width of only 7 5/8 inches by 5 3/4 inches in depth. Our C2 panel board is designed for a 480 volt phase-to-phase or 277 to neutral AC maximum service with a slightly larger width of 8.5 inches by 5 3/4 inches in depth. Both of these panels are designed for 100 amps to 250 amps in their mains and can be main breaker or main lug only. Finally, let's move on to the selling features of all of the panel boards that Siemens has to offer, starting with our P2 and P3. With these panels, we're able to include Delta-rated branches, XGB2 and 3VA52 in fiscal year 18, which we're extremely excited about because that just adds to the flexibility of these panels and allows us to integrate brand new technology. Moving on to our P5 power panel board, our 400 amp is able to get nose to nose in 38 inches of width, which is a huge benefit on space savings. And this is always extremely important with our customers' electrical rooms just getting smaller and smaller every single year. Finally, our DAS maintenance mode is available in our P4 and P5 power panel boards. And this is extremely important with the NEC getting stricter and stricter on its 240.87 arc energy reduction requirements. So all of these in general are just selling features that we're really excited about. You can find more in the individual slides mentioned earlier in this presentation, or also in the more specific brain charts, which will be mentioned on the next slide. Finally, now that we've discussed an overview of all of the panel boards that Siemens has to offer, I want to give you some additional supporting material. As you can see here, 4 main options are listed on the screen, starting with our speed facts, which is our product catalog, which can be found online at the link above. Our other panel board brain charts go more specifically into each one of these panel boards that were listed in the brain chart today. Those can be found at the link under number 2. The Siemens Download Center includes all of the collateral that we've made on each of these panel boards. That includes all of our flyers and brochures regarding each one of these individually. And finally, we have our panel boards website, which you can find online at www.usa.siemens.com/panelboard. All in all, that concludes our panel boards overview brain chart. I'd like to thank you all for listening and learning more about our offerings. If you'd like any additional information that isn't covered here or on any of the supporting information that you found on the last slide, we have the contact information for each of the product managers that cover the panel boards listed in this brain chart. First is Tony Perini, who is our lighting panels product manager, covering P1 through P3, as well as our C1 and C2 panel boards. We also have Faizan Najmi, who covers our power panels P4 and P5. Once again, I would like to thank you all for listening and have a great day.